Well, hello everybody and welcome to Jeff's Baking Blog. Today I'm going to make Coronation Quiche. So this is going to be a quiche which has been presented on the Royal Family website for the coronation of King Charles, and in that recipe, and I watched the video of it being made in the kitchens at Buckingham Palace. In that recipe they used an 8-inch pastry ring, which is just a ring of steel basically, which is they stand onto a baking tray and they shape the pastry within that. Now most people don't have those, so I've decided to adapt the recipe to do it in a 9-inch fluted tart tin, which many more people have, and that has a removable base. And it's actually quite a simple recipe because it's just making the pastry, making the filling, blind baking the pastry, then putting the filling in and baking it again. And it seems that they're recommending that this be eaten as part of the big lunch, which I think is a celebration which is going to happen on Sunday the 7th of May. But I think it would be ideal as a lunch that you can enjoy on the 6th of May, which is the day of the coronation. While you're watching the coronation proceedings, you can actually enjoy this with some salad or some new potatoes and such like, and spring vegetables. So I'll go on to the ingredients, and for this, for the pastry, as I said, I've adapted this. So I have 250 grams, which is 1 2/3 cups based on scooping packed flour into a 250 milliliter cup of plain flour. Then I have 50 grams each of unsalted butter and lard. That's 3.5 tablespoons each, or 7 tablespoons in all, and you could use all butter, you could use all lard, that's up to you. I have 3 grams, half a teaspoon of salt, and 60 millilitres, a quarter of a cup of milk, and I may not need all of that milk. So those are the 4 ingredients for the pastry, or the 5 ingredients for the pastry basically. And then for the filling, I have 3 medium eggs, which would be large in the USA. Then in this jug I have 150 millilitres, half a cup plus 2 tablespoons of milk, and 220 millilitres, 1 cup minus 4 teaspoons of double cream. I'll put them in the same jug because they're going to be used at the same time basically. Then I have 125 grams, 8.5 ounces of grated cheddar cheese. I have 180 grams here, which is 6.5 ounces of cooked spinach, which I have chopped quite finely. So I've mashed as much water out of that as I can, and I've then chopped them up quite finely. And I may not need all of that. I've seen some articles where they say there's too much spinach in the recipe, so I may not need all of that. I have 80 grams, 3 ounces of cooked broad beans. Now you could use a tin of broad beans, drain the liquid off and take 80 grams of that out, or you can use freshly shelled broad beans and cook those through. So that's the broad beans. I have 1 teaspoon of dried mixed herbs. You could use a tablespoon of mixed herbs. The original recipe calls for a tablespoon of tarragon, which is a very strong licorice flavoured herb, and I prefer the more delicate flavours of the mixed herbs. And because I'm using dried rather than fresh, I'm using a teaspoon rather than tablespoon. And then I have a half a teaspoon of salt or thereabouts, and 1/4 to half a teaspoon of ground pepper. That's for seasoning afterwards. So I can set those ingredients all to one side while we make the pastry. And I'm going to make the pastry in the processor bowl of my immersion blender, and I'm simply going to put the flour in, and the salt. And then I'll add in the lard and the butter. And then I'm going to process those, pulsing it, until the mixture resembles a fine breadcrumb, basically. And that's good enough. So then I'm going to pour in some of my milk, and I'll probably pour in 2 tablespoons to start with. And I will mix that processing it until it starts to clump, adding a little bit more milk if I need it. So I'm going to add another tablespoon of milk. And I will just give it a little bit of a scrape around the side. And continue processing it. So I can see that's clumping together now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tip that out into the bowl that I had my flour in. And I'm going to use my hand and just knead that gently between my fingers. And then I'm going to put that into some plastic wrap. I'm going to just press that down into a disc. And I'm going to wrap that like that, and I'm going to put it in the fridge and chill it for 30 minutes, 30 to 45 minutes, let it chill, and then I'll come back and we'll roll it out and put it into our tart case for blind baking. So I've allowed my pastry to chill for about 45 minutes, and I put it onto a floured work surface, and I'm going to roll it out to a thickness of about 5 millimeters, which is roughly 1/4 of an inch. And I think that's probably good enough. So I'm going to roll that up onto my rolling pin. And I should say that if your pastry cracks while you're working with it, you can patch it, it will be absolutely fine. I'm going to put that into my 9-inch tart tin. And that's good like that. So I'm actually just going to leave the excess on the tin, just bending it over a little bit, because as I blind bake it, it might shrink just a little bit, and then I'll trim it later. So with that in the tin like that, I'm going to prick the base all over with a fork. Just like that. So then I'm going to put that into the fridge, and I'm going to chill it for another 30 minutes. And as it chills, I'm going to preheat my oven to 190 degrees Celsius, 170 Celsius with a fan, 375 Fahrenheit, and that will then be ready to bake this. But I'll come back before I put it into the oven, because we're going to put the parchment paper in and some baking beans. My oven is preheated now, and the pastry has been chilling in the fridge for 30 minutes. So I'm going to take some parchment paper, which I've scrunched up to make it easier to fit, and I'm going to fit it into the base of the pastry, and then I'm going to pour in ceramic baking beans. Now if you don't have ceramic baking beans, you can use some pasta or some dried beans or some rice, and that will do the job just as well. But of course you then store those to use for the same thing another time. You don't actually cook them afterwards. So I'm now going to put that into the oven, and I'm going to bake it for 15 minutes. And after 15 minutes I'm going to take it out of the oven, remove the baking beans and the paper, and put it back into the oven for a further 5 minutes. That's to cook the base of the pastry right through. And what I'll actually do is I will crack my eggs for the filling, and I will just brush the inside of the pastry case with some of the egg white, and that will create a seal as it bakes for that extra 5 minutes. And once that's baked, I'll come back and we'll make our filling and assemble the quiche for baking. So my pastry is now blind baked, and I have reduced the temperature of my oven to 160 Celsius, 140 Celsius with a fan, 320 Fahrenheit, ready to take the quiche for baking. So what we'll do is mix our ingredients. So into my bowl I'm going to put my cream and milk mixture, and then I'm going to add into that my eggs, and my herbs, and I'm just going to whisk those to get them combined. And I think I'll add in my salt and pepper at the same time. And that's good enough. So then I'll just set that to one side for a moment, and I'll take my pastry and I'm going to sprinkle about half of my cheese over the base. Like that, and then I'm going to take my spinach and sprinkle that on the top. And if I have more spinach than I need, that doesn't matter. I just want to cover it And as I mentioned earlier, it's very important to get a lot of or as much liquid out of this cooked spinach as you can. And that's good enough like that. So then I'll take my beans and I'll sprinkle those over as well. And I'll put the remaining cheese on the top. Like that, and then I'll pour my egg mixture over, and I'll just give it a gentle little pat. So that looks good like that, and I'm going to put that into my oven now, and I'm going to bake it for between 25 and 35 minutes. I'm going to bake it until it sets and it's turned a golden colour with some brown patches over the top, and then once it's set I'll take it out of the oven and allow it to cool down, and once it's cooled down I'll come back and show you the results. I baked the Coronation Quiche for 35 minutes and it was just about set on top, so I actually left it in for a couple of minutes longer, and then I took it out of the oven and I've allowed it to cool down a little bit. It's still warm because I want to eat it while it's warm, or some of it while it's warm at least. So this is what it looks like, and as you can see I've cut a slice, so it's baked up quite nicely, I have to say, and I'll have a taste of the slice that I've cut. Oh, it's very, very nice indeed. It's got that creamy, cheesy taste to it. A lovely creamy texture, but it's cheesy as well. And I actually had a nice soft broad bean in that mouthful, so I'll have another taste. You can never get too much of a good thing. That is very, very good indeed. So I've adapted this, as I said, from the recipe, the official recipe, and I'm glad I did, because I think using that full amount, 180 grams of spinach in a pie which is only 80% of the size of this one might be too much. And you can vary it, and as I said, I put mixed herbs in mine rather than tarragon, because I think the tarragon flavour would be slightly too strong for my tastes. So this is an ideal thing that you could make for the big lunch, which I think is on Sunday the 7th of May. But you can also, as I mentioned earlier, have it for your lunch while you're watching and enjoying the coronation ceremony, basically. So that's going to be it for this recipe. I hope you've enjoyed it, and if you have, please give me the thumbs up below and click to subscribe to my YouTube channel. In the top right hand corner of the screen there'll be an eye that you can click on, and that will take you to a link for the recipe, and I'll put a link below the video as well, and I'll be back with another recipe in the very near future. So until then, happy baking.